Hi, Jonathan York from Financial Partners, looking at investment markets. In the end, a pretty strong sort of retail sales numbers over Black Friday sales and Cyber Monday in the US. Black Friday was up around sort of 7%, Cyber Monday was up around 11%. And in dollar terms was around sort of 9 billion for Black Friday and around 11 billion for Cyber Monday. So that shows the US economy is still pretty resilient out there, and certainly the US consumer is still pretty resilient. Indeed, the latest GDP numbers came in a little bit stronger than first forecast, 5.2% for the third quarter. That's a pretty reasonable annualized rate. But what is very interesting is that, if you look at the earnings season, they've been pretty good on the whole. Probably around 80% of companies that have reported have beaten estimates. But more importantly, with inflation falling now, the latest sort of comments coming out of the Fed and Fed officials appears to imply that the Fed is now on hold and is all done. And that's seen those longer term rates in the US really fall pretty dramatically. 10 years back to 427, just a few weeks ago that was trading at 5%. And the 2 years back to 468. Now, if you look on average over the last sort of 30, 40 years, the time from when the Fed has sort of paused in terms of interest rate hikes to when it starts cutting, on average is around 6 months. And the Fed paused in July of this year. Now, while no one is expecting a rate cut in December, when you look at first quarter of next year, potentially that's possible maybe March time, but more than likely sort of second quarter next year, we expect to see a cut in US interest rates. A little bit good news as well on the geopolitical front. We've seen a ceasefire now between Hamas and Israel. That's now in its fourth day, and hopefully that is going to be extended now. Just a question of wait and see if that is actually the case. Meanwhile, Ukraine and Russia just sort of drags on. Russia has increased its sort of drone attacks on the sort of Ukrainian cities. Putin is sort of hell-bent on trying to win that war at no matter what cost to the Russian economy. And on the political front in the US now, it's less than 12 months until the US election. Now, oil OPEC Plus meets this week. It's just going to be interesting to see what they come up with, see if there will be any further sort of production cuts. Oil currently around sort of 76 bucks and change. A little bit of good news in the UK. Consumer confidence is up a little bit. That's on the back of sort of some policy changes that are coming through from the government in terms of reducing national insurance contributions, but also as well potentially some sort of tax cuts down the road as well. And some pretty major infrastructure sort of spending and sort of tax relief for companies setting up new enterprises, etc. Now in Europe, quite interesting, in the recent Dutch election, a far-right anti-Muslim candidate won a seat in the Dutch parliament. So it'll just be interesting to see if he does manage to sort of build a little bit of momentum on that, because he's already come out and sort of taking the win and sort of grandstanding out there, saying that he will become Prime Minister very quickly. No real comments out there from ECB members, but looking at it, the ECB is clearly on hold now in terms of rates, and just be a question of when they start to cut. Historically, the ECB has been a little bit sort of a drag on sort of policy decisions, and it takes them longer to come up with any decisions. Now, certainly the retail sales picture in Australia, again, is reasonably encouraging. Consumer out there is still pretty resilient, and economic activity is still pretty good. Although at present Australia has been lambasted with a pretty big storm coming in sort of southern Australia and New South Wales, getting hammered with thunder and lightning and heavy rain. So hopefully there won't be too much damage out there for sort of infrastructure, etc. Now here in New Zealand, we finally have a government, National New Zealand First and ACT have formed a coalition. And certainly Prime Minister Luxon has really put forward some pretty big changes in the first sort of 100 days. But certainly the country does need a bit of a push to get going again. Because certainly under Labor, businesses didn't feel like they were getting much of a sort of helping hand out there, and were just sort of being punished at pretty much every turn. Now again, quite interesting, New Zealand sort of wholesale interest rates have fallen pretty dramatically again. That 10 and 2 year are down around sort of 3/4 of a point over the last sort of couple of weeks. Because one of the major high street banks did actually cut its mortgage rates late last week. Now again, the Reserve Bank yesterday met and left rates on hold. OCR at 5.5 still came out with the sort of same story about fighting inflation. Rates need to remain higher for longer to keep that fight against inflation. Now the next meeting for the Reserve Bank is now February. So if you are looking for income options, go to the website www.bayfinancialpartners.co.nz for lots of interesting articles, and we look forward to speaking to you soon.